The following program is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not to be considered legal advice. Fraudsters Radio was created to expose the many scams and frauds that have so infected society today. Scammers, fraudsters, and rip-off artists abound, whether it's scamming homeowners with bogus foreclosure relief services, dating fraud, incompetent lawyers, or consumer rip-offs. It's high time the public has a voice. If you work in a profession that deals with fraud, or if you believe you were or are a victim of fraud, you now have a radio listening public that wants to hear from you. Please feel free to message us through our Fraudsters Radio Facebook page, and we may have you on the show as a guest. If you'd like to call in for today's show, the number is 646-668-8512.
And welcome to Fraudsters Radio. This is your host, Lori Z., nationally syndicated radio host and consumer advocate, along with my co-host, Storm Bradford. Storm, are you with me?
I am with you. How are you this morning?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing great. We're going to have a really good show today because in about 15 minutes we are going to have the Chief Operating Officer, Larry Lieberman from Chariy Navigators, calling in. I want to talk today about vetting charities because, as you know, there are a million charity scams, a lot of them online where people are, getting defrauded, and we want to find out, the real lowdown, on how it works and what people should look out for.
Well, it sounds like an exciting show. Obviously it's something that needs to be looked into. There's a lot of this type of scam going on. I remember as a kid, there was another kid in my neighborhood that used to collect for UNICEF at Halloween time. And
right.
He went to all these houses, collected all this money, and kept it.
A kid.
Yeah, a kid.
That's sad.
It's very, very sad, but it's quite common.
Yeah, well, it makes me wonder, you see, you go into a restaurant or you go to a retail location and they have one of those put the coins in the container, and it's got a picture of like a missing child or a pet, an animal on it. And I always go, wow, I wonder, does anyone actually get this money, or do the people that have them up just keep it? You don't know.
Well, this morning, for an example, I go to Starbucks. They said, would you like to put the rest of it towards this charity? I was at the grocery store yesterday. Would you like to put, and I forgot what it was, what my bill was, but it was some change. Would you like to put it to the next highest number? And I said to the people there, I said, what do you know about this charity? Well, I don't know anything about it, but obviously we're collecting money for it. So, constantly you're being inundated with charities that, people are collecting money for, not knowing where it's going.
Right. And, it's interesting because I know at the supermarket by me, a lot of times after there's like a major hurricane in some area, they want to round up your whatever you spent to the nearest dollar amount so that change is going towards that charity. But I always wonder, wow, is it really going there? Now, on the other hand, if I've gone into Goodwill and they ask if they can round it up, usually I'll do that because I know it's going to Goodwill. But I know with Goodwill, and this is one of the questions I'm going to ask Mr. Lieberman, is that some of these charities, their executives make exorbitant amounts of money, and what percentage of what you donate actually goes to whatever the program itself is. I know like with Salvation Army, the guy who runs it makes hardly anything, and most of the money actually supposedly goes to the actual charity. So people don't think about when they're donating to a charity, what percentage of that money is actually going to help people, right?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, there's some of them where the president or the head of this, quote, nonprofit, the reason why they're a nonprofit is because all the administrators make enormous sums of money. Something that I was shocked to find out was years ago that Jerry Lewis, who did the March of Dimes telethon every year,
right.
They paid him $5 million to do that show.
That's a lot of money, and I didn't know that. I thought that was something he just donated his his time as a celebrity to do. So that's another question we'll have for Mr. Lieberman is, you see a lot of celebrities promoting charities, but are they paid endorsers or are they doing it for the good of the actual charity?
Absolutely. And, they're taking money. They sit there, pull at your heartstrings, and they're taking money from somebody that may be making $25,000 a year. He's making minimum wage, and they're donating their money. And here's this guy making $5 million just to do this telethon. What do you do? Stay up for like
24 hours.
Yeah, 34 hours or something like that. And makes $5 million. I mean, it's ridiculous.
I do that.
I didn't see any.
Right. Who wouldn't do that? Who wouldn't do that for $5 million? But I'm curious if he ever actually donated any of that money that he made back to the charity or not. We don't know.
Well, nobody probably want to see it, but I'd go on the show nude and do it.
Okay, I'd pay for that. I'd pay to see that, Storm.
No, you wouldn't.
Well, I don't know. It'll be an interesting show, and since we're always talking about scams and frauds, I recently had a friend. I just want to share this story because this is such a common thing. Who saw online a Netflix promotion, and it looked real. The URL looked real. Everything looked real, and so he went online to sign up for Netflix. And the next thing, and he did it by debit card, which of course is the most dangerous thing you can do. People use debit like it's nothing, and I almost never use debit. But long story short, lost all the money out of his bank account to Nigerian scammers. They just suck the money right out, and as you know from previous shows we've done with the FBI, once it's out of the country, there might be someone in the United States that's the in-between person, but after that it leaves the country, you can't get your money back. So, it's funny, as a credit consultant, I try to warn people, don't use a debit card. It's too dangerous. You don't know. And even if it's a legitimate company, if they accidentally, hit ×2 and it doubles your amount, you could have your account crashing down with all your checks bouncing. But the scams have become so unreal online, and the companies and the URLs, they look so real. If you see a special promotion like that, call the actual company up on their legitimate phone number that's on your bill and ask them about the promotion. Because if someone said to me, we only do that online, I'd pass.
Yeah. Well, also I guess as Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story, over last week, late last week, and we posted it. Mark Stopa, an attorney who we had complained about, one of the biggest stall attorneys there is in the state of Florida, and for years how he was ripping off homeowners. Well, the law enforcement down in Florida raided his office and such, and found, and we knew this because we had heard it from several people, but found that he was basically equity skimming his clients' homes. And as part of the raid, they found out that he was using, what he was doing, well, we knew about this, that he was using these shell corporations to hide all of this stuff. But what he was doing is that he'd obtain title from his clients that had these homes that were in foreclosure throughout Florida using these shell corporations, and a lot of them he had registered in New Mexico. And then what he would do is he'd rent the properties out while under the guise of representing the owners, continuing to fight the foreclosure cases. And they subpoenaed his PayPal account and discovered deposits from individuals at approximately 20 properties controlled by his properties to the tune of almost $5 million.
Wow, that's unreal. I did look at the article you posted on your Facebook page, and I remember thinking, what kind of a person would do that? You start, if you're an attorney, you have fiduciary responsibility to your client to represent the client, and in actuality, he was opposing the client. You know what I'm saying? Because he was collecting money off he was making money off of everybody. He was screwing everybody over. And so, I look at the psychology of it and go, this guy's got to be a nut. He's got to be a greedy nut.
Well, it's not so much that he's a nut. It's just they're greedy. And trust me, he's not the only one doing it. He's not the only one of these stall attorneys doing it. Matter of fact, when I came to Florida years ago when you and I met, they were having a group meet afterwards, and they had this one guy was going to show these attorneys how to do exactly what Stopa did.
Wow. Well, I think I remember meeting you after that meeting. Yep, and you got up and you yep.
And I told him, I said, don't you dare go to that meeting. I said, because, if you do anything, go to the meeting, record it so you can give it to the authorities. Because I said, what they're doing is a crime. But they had these attorneys signing up to go.
Well, that's it. I mean, and who do you report them to? The bar? I mean, the Florida bar, a lot of times just they don't even seem to care. They don't do anything. I mean, we invited them to be on the show and they declined, and I thought that was it kind of said something there, because here's an opportunity to talk about what people can do if they've been taken advantage of by their attorney with that fiduciary responsibility and they decline to be on the show. And, it concerns me when you have licensed professionals. Attorneys, do they take an oath like a doctor, like not to do any harm?
Yeah, they have to uphold the Constitution. There's a lot of things that they have to take to. But, again, any time that you have, and I don't care, it's kind of like these disasters that you have with hurricanes. You have people that go out and they charge $100 for a 24-bottle case of water. They
price gouging.
Yeah. And what they do is that they look at a problem and they say, okay, how do I make money off of that other person's problem? And that's how these people get taken advantage of. It's like we've said all along. These stall attorneys in Florida are not only committing malpractice because it's an ethics violation just to stall a case, and two, they're doing the types of things that Stopa are doing. And trust me when I tell you again, he is not the only one. We have evidence that other people are doing it as well. At least we've been given tips of other attorneys that are doing the same thing.
Right. Years ago there was a group called the Jedi Group. I think it was JEDTI, and it was a group of attorneys. I don't know if you remember when April Charney came out. She was in Florida, and she had her own way of doing things. And so a bunch of these attorneys in my area got together.
She's another hack. Anyone that is doing nothing else than stalling by making stall arguments, we've been preaching this since day one. Nobody is going to win arguing produce the note, MERS, securitization, didn't get to the trust in time, standing, assignments, ever. They're never going to win. Nobody's ever won yet. They've stalled them, but they're not going to win because the homeowner agreed that if they failed to make timely payments, the bank and or their assigns could take the house. So anybody that's out there preaching this type of nonsense is just basically ripping off homeowners.
Right, but people become desensitized. There are so many rip-offs, it seems to me, that the bad people are starting to outnumber the good people, and the good people are becoming sheeple, and they're, because they hear all this stuff, and they hear it from their friends, and they read it online, or they see it somewhere on a website, they think it's true, and that's scary to me.
And they perpetuate the lie. There's a political term called a useful idiot, and useful idiots are people who hear a narrative, they don't understand the narrative, they just hear it. And then they go out and they parrot that narrative. And it gets to the point where you just have, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that are doing nothing more than perpetuating this narrative that is a lie.
I don't know. It's become a scary world. But what I want to do is this. Before we go to a commercial break and come back with our guests, if you have a question and you'd like to call in Our call-in number is 646-668-8512. That's 646-668-8512. Stay with us. We're going to a commercial break. We will be right back.
Have you received a notice of foreclosure on your property? Do you suspect that you're involved in an unfair or fraudulent loan agreement? Are you looking for a way to save your home? Would you like to cut through all the misinformation and find out what really works? Would you like to learn strategies that the so-called gurus aren't aware of? If you answered yes to any of those questions, a professional team at Mortgage Fraud Examiners can assist you and your attorney with all of these things and more. Contract breaches, errors, statutory regulatory violations, fraudulent appraisals, and other fraudulent conduct cause most mortgages to be legally problematic. In fact, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation found that nearly 2,000 financial institutions they assessed received citations for significant compliance violations. They also examined appraisals and found out that of the 259 appraisals reviewed for accuracy, only 7 fully complied with professional standards. Call us at 844-920-7200. That's 844-920-7200. Mortgage Fraud Examiners, 844-920-7200.
Okay, guys and gals, we're back on AM/FM 24/7 radio. Today we have a special guest, but before we introduce him, Laurie, I was going to say something that I have been lax at, but you haven't. And that is telling our listeners that if they have a tip, matter of fact, a lot of the stuff that we found out has been tips, that if they know anything about a scam or a scammer or some scam going on, is to call us and make us aware of it, and we can either have them on as a guest if it's happened to them, or we can investigate a little further and then find out what's going on with that. But why don't you introduce our guest? He's quite famous at what he does.
Right. Well, I believe we have on the line Chief Operating Officer Larry Lieberman. He's from Chariy Navigator, and we want to talk about vetting charity. So, Larry, are you with us?
I am indeed.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us.
Please, thanks for having me.
Well, as you kind of guessed, the name of the show, Fraudsters Radio, we're all about exposing scams and frauds and fraudsters, trying to tell people what to look out for and what they can do if they've been ripped off. Maybe you can start out by telling us a little bit about yourself and how you came to Chariy Navigator.
Sure. Well, Chariy Navigator has been around over 16 years now, and it's regarded as the largest independent evaluator of nonprofits in America. So my background actually is in the for-profit sector. I've been very active in philanthropy and nonprofits for the past couple of decades. But really, as a career, I come from places like Comedy Central and television and the music business. So I come from a world where urgency is critical, and it's usually rewarded, and it's a great deal of fun to be able to apply that kind of rationale and that kind of quick thinking to the work we do at Chariy Navigator in evaluating organizations.
Gotcha. Now, I want to ask you a question, and I'm sure you've heard this before, because I actually asked Sarah, who put us in touch at your company. There has been a chart floating around on Facebook for years that lists different charities, and that says it'll say like Goodwill, don't donate to Goodwill because 96% of the money they keep and 4% goes to charity, but do donate to Salvation Army because they're the other way around. Their CEO takes almost nothing and almost all the money goes to charity. And so, what's the truth about that chart that's been floating around? Because I know everybody reposts it. I've reposted it myself. I look at it and I go, wow, I didn't know all that. I mean, true or false?
As a general rule, false. I mean, our mission as educated consumers should certainly be to avoid making decisions about anything that's been floating around the Internet for years.
Gotcha. All right, Storm, got any questions before I jump in on it?
No, I'm just waiting to get educated.
Okay. Well, I read through a lot of your website. You have got a tremendous amount of information. I mean, to me, it looks like you actually cover just about everything. I wanted to start with your top 10 list. because you have a lot on that list. Charities with perfect scores, the 10 most followed charities, charities expanding in a hurry. Can you talk about that top 10 list a little bit?
Sure. Listen, the top 10 lists are really convenient packaging for the work that our analysts do here 365 days a year. Right? We've got a dedicated staff at Chariy Navigator that researches and evaluates charities based partially on their financial history as reported through their IRS tax returns, and also reviews their management practices, especially towards accountability and transparency and how they treat donor data and things along those lines. So what we have in the top 10 is really a very handy way for consumers to come to our site. The top 10 list link is literally at the top center of our site. And it's one of the most used features by our site visitors because people are coming very often with a cause in mind, right? They want to give to one particular cause, say it's breast cancer. And with the top 10 list, we can send them a list. They can view a list immediately of 10 very, very highly rated organizations. And then if they'd like, click on a link and just make a donation right off the Chariy Navigator site that we earn no fee from. It's a service we provide our users, and we are ourselves a nonprofit. So
let me ask you, how do you as a company, as a nonprofit, how do you actually make money?
It's a beautiful thing. So we are a nonprofit. Things that I'm committed to are never charging a charity ever for any information we do, and never charging a consumer ever for the information we share with them, right? We are here as a public service to help donors give to the most effective organizations that we can identify for them and help them make their giving decisions. So fortunately, we are supported through the generosity of users who come to our site and give us $50 or $100 in gratitude for the information we've given them. And purely on a voluntary basis, we're able to support our work. In addition to that, we're very fortunate to have the support of some very important foundations and philanthropists in the country who want to improve the information that consumers have access to, and they also support our work.
Now, Storm, I want Storm to share his story about Jerry Lewis, and then let's talk about the celebrity-related charity. So, Storm, tell Larry what you were telling me before.
Yeah, Larry, I read, and this has been several years ago, because obviously he's not done the telethon for several years, but I read where they paid him $5 million a year to do that show. And when I read that, I felt somewhat cheated in a way because, here's a man who's pulling at your heartstrings, who's crying up on the stage. He's basically just making it where he's making you feel as though that unless you give money to this cause, that somehow you're a bad person not to do it. At least that's how I felt. And to find out that he was paid $5 million to stay up for 30-some-odd hours really kind of ticked me off when I heard that. Do you have any idea if that's just an urban legend or if it's true or not?
Well, I can't speak to the dollar amount itself, but I can tell you, and it's a great example you bring up, and an organization that really has listened to its donors, the general public, and the word that's circulating. Muscular Dystrophy Association just recently, I guess in the past year, maybe year and a half, brought on a new CEO. It's an incredibly talented woman named Lynn Voss, who comes from the private sector and has run enormous organizations and is known for her efficiency and effectiveness. The board and governing bodies of muscular dystrophy have clearly understood that their mission and their work is in jeopardy, and have hired such an extraordinary talent to turn a new leaf over for the Muscular Dystrophy Association. Along with Lynn Voss is a brand new CFO, and the accountability and work being done at that organization is really pretty extraordinary.
Well, you know, Larry, I think something else that, and I just saw this recently before I knew you were coming on, and I wish I had saved it, but it was an article that there's a bunch of these scam organizations, alleged charities, that are collecting money for, quote, wounded warriors. And I've seen commercials on television before for wounded warriors and such, to donate money. And the names that these scams were using, I'm listening to I'm reading them obviously, but in my mind, I'm telling myself, well, wait a minute, I've heard that before. I thought that was a legit group. And there was like 20 of them. We find that in our industry, where you have companies that were allegedly saving homeowners' homes that were in foreclosure, and they were using names to make you think they were a government agency. So, to see that and to see the amount of people that are doing this is it's horrible to even think about it.
Yeah, this is an issue I can go about, going on about it forever. It's really a tragedy in a lot of different ways. I guess the first thing to point out is that this summer, the FTC and the attorneys general from all 50 states in the union announced a very specific campaign to go after organizations that are alleging to serve vets and do not. So again, it's a matter that is both a shame and a crime, and the FTC and the attorney generals are prosecuting. But that's what we're doing overall. But what can a consumer do is really what we focus so much on at Chariy Navigator. And in that end, we try and encourage consumers to think about their philanthropy the same way they think about their retirement savings. If someone were to call you up out of the blue and tell you that they had a great investment for your 401k, you'd probably do a little research before you moved your investment dollars for your retirement. The exact same is true for philanthropy. When people get a phone call out of the blue, by all means, if it's a subject that interests you, listen. But do not give during that phone call, no matter who it is. Do your research, understand what the organization does, and remember that your own giving is an investment in our collective community welfare. And treat it like it's an investment, and do the research.
Right. And before we go to I'm going to jump in real quick, Storm.
I just want to ask quickly, Laurie, that
okay.
Is it your website, or is there any website that us as consumers can go to that we can look to see if this group is a scam or not? Because like I said, these 25 names that I saw that they were soliciting donations, all were dealing with wounded veterans that had served. But again, I was looking at them and I thought they all sounded legit. I thought they were all legit. Is there a way for us as consumers to check them out?
Yep, there certainly is. So Chariy Navigator's database includes over 1.8 million nonprofits in America. Okay, wow. We review and evaluate thousands and thousands of them, and right on our homepage at charitynavigator.org, right at the bottom of the page, is a large link that says Chariy Navigator Advisories. The aspect of Chariy Navigator rating and evaluating organizations, we rate on a 0 to 4 star scale. 3 and 4 star organizations are highly rated, and we certainly share the information with our users to encourage them to support the work of these organizations. There's also a negative side of ratings, which are these advisories. And it's a very, very important part of our work. We also work with all 50 attorneys general around the country and share information with them, and when necessary, both assist with prosecution and publish the results of investigations. So if you're an organization that is under investigation by the government, you're going to get what we call a medium advisory just for being under investigation, where we can encourage donors to research the allegations. They may not be true. The organization, like everyone else, is innocent until proven guilty. But it's an opportunity for us to raise the flag and let consumers know that they should be doing more research. The highest advisory, and that is a high advisory, there are over 240 organizations on our list receiving a high advisory. I go out of my way not to call them charities with high advisories because so many of them are actually not charities. They're just the names that people are using to collect money on behalf of the appeal and sympathies we have for storm victims, hurricanes, or anything else. So on Charities Navigator site, you can either enter the name of the organization that's soliciting you, and if we have an advisory on them, it will appear right on their rating page. Alternatively, if you just want to see, the 240 or so organizations with high advisories, you can just click on that and go down the list.
Can you run that number past me again, which sounds almost to the point of unimaginable? How many did you say nonprofits there are that you have in your registry?
There's about 1.8 million nonprofits in this country.
Whoa.
The number has grown rapidly over the last few years, and it's challenging for any consumer to keep up.
So there's 1.8 million companies that are coming to consumers looking for money.
Not all are soliciting. Included in that group are private foundations. So organizations like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is a nonprofit organization. And, of course, they're not soliciting donations from anyone. They're fortunate enough to have their money given by the Gates family.
But of the 1.8, I would assume that the vast, vast majority are soliciting money.
I think that's probably fair to say because obviously they include just about certainly every nonprofit hospital in America, most universities in America, many houses of worship, as well as the more typical nonprofit organization that we associate with the sector, like food banks and international relief organizations or the American Red Cross.
All right. Well, we got to do a quick commercial break. Larry, don't go anywhere. We got a lot more questions for you. So stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
There is a very high likelihood your mortgage contains an extensive error. At Mortgage Fraud Examiners, we know just how costly a missed opportunity can be. For almost 40 years, we have consulted, retained, and referred to by attorneys, lawyers, trial practitioners throughout the nation. Put another way, we are the trusted source for litigation support. A foreclosure is basically an allegation the homeowner breached the contract by failing to make timely payments. The contract is clear. The borrower promised they would make timely payments, and if they didn't, the lender could take the property. The only way to overcome the homeowner's breach is to show the lender breached first, identify errors that would void the contract, identify regulatory violations, identify appraisal fraud and other fraudulent contact, and the only way to find these wrongs is to thoroughly examine the whole mortgage transaction. This meticulous examination of your mortgage transaction and appraisal can identify legal defects that would make your mortgage unenforceable and entitle you to compensation or even free title to your property. Call us at 844-920-7200. Mortgage Fraud Examiners, that's 844-920-7200. 844-920-7200.
Well, we're back on AM/FM 24/7 radio with our special guest, Larry Lieberman. Larry's been educating us on how not to get scammed by charities. Laurie, take it away.
All right. Well, I got to share a little story with you because now I question things sometimes after the fact. So where I live now, I've lived for about 4 years, and when you get your cable equipment, a lot of times they bundle in a phone, and so we don't really use the home phone. And one day the home phone rings, and it's a solicitation. It sounds like a police officer. They just have that certain sound to their voice, and they're soliciting for the Police Athletic League. And I think I made maybe a $10 donation. The bizarre part was that phone, no one had that number other than that one person I answered the call for. That my phone used to ring, I'm going to tell you, 20 times a day. They must have passed my number out. And finally, I remember everyone that called, I said, I no longer give solicitations over the phone. If you have something you want to mail me and you have my mailing address, you can go ahead and do that. What advice would you give to someone that's getting these calls for, I know you're going to say go to Chariy Navigator, but when they're calling on the phone, you might not be near your computer. And so is it safe to say that if they're not willing to mail you information, that they may not be legitimate?
That's not necessarily the case. Unfortunately, there's so many layers in solicitation that the people who do the phone solicitations may have no connection to the people who are doing the mail solicitations. So I don't want to wipe that out as a category, but what I will say, and we tell our donors this, when you receive a phone call, if the organization and their work seem interesting to you and potentially something that you want to donate to, and you're right, you can go to Chariy Navigator or go to their website. Write down the name of the organization and just go directly to their website and do some research. Right? I categorically tell people if you get a phone call, it's an opportunity to learn, but it is not an opportunity to write a check.
Right. Okay. Now you talk
or worse still. It's actually, it's not a time to give a credit card number. You should never pay any organization in cash. You should never pay an organization by gift cards. These are all indications that the organization itself or the solicitor themselves may not accurately be representing that organization.
Gotcha. Now, you talk on your website. It talks about 5 steps to informed giving. Can you kind of go over those steps for our listeners so that they know exactly what they should do?
Absolutely. And they're really important. The very first thing you really want to do when you're considering giving to a cause is be proactive in your giving. And sometimes I say that as make a connection. We all are better givers when we care about the organizations we're giving to. So do your research. Think about what's hitting closest to home for you, what problems are most important to you, and reach out and find the organizations you want to give to. Please don't wait until they find you, because that's when these phone calls come. Right? Second step is research, and we've been talking about that quite a bit. It's research the organization that you're interested in and get deeper into it by trying to learn a little bit about their impact. How is this organization changing the world? Efficiency is nice and it's important, but effectiveness is really what it's all about. Is the work the organization doing really providing the relief that's enabling the beneficiary to get on with their life in a better way? So those are really the big 3 going in. 4, we talk about considering the way you give. It's much more beneficial for organizations to have you as a monthly recurring giver rather than a one-time-a-year giver. It helps spread out the money across the year that they receive and gives them a little more predictability. It also is certainly easier for us as givers because it's a smaller amount that is not life-changing. And then the big one that closes it all up is follow your investment in philanthropy. There's no reason to give and think that's the last time you should hear from or research a charity. Sign up for their newsletters. Read their postings on the website. Maybe even set a news alert so you can keep track of what this organization's doing and stay informed about the work they do.
Good advice.
Larry, I got a question for you, which is, I guess you could almost define it as a charity, but crowdfunding, where does that fall into people getting scammed by sending money to people who are requesting it through crowdfunding?
That's a great question. And certainly there's been a whole lot in the news recently about the couple in Philadelphia who raised money on behalf of a gentleman who was homeless and provided aid for them. I think the first thing is to tell the listeners that the organization that ran that crowdfunding platform has made the gentleman whole and paid him the entire amount of money that was donated through the site. So that particular case has certainly not been adjudicated, but at least the beneficiary has received his money. When it comes to giving money online through crowdfunding, it's very important to just do a little bit of research and make sure that the money you're giving is not being received by the person who sponsored the fundraising. You don't have to give the money, in this example, to that couple in Philadelphia. There's a marvelous platform called CrowdRise. It is owned by GoFundMe. And CrowdRise allows you to sponsor a fundraiser, but 100% of the money that gets donated goes directly to the organization without the organizer ever touching it. So that's a big difference. There's no middleman. The sponsor of that crowd funding campaign does not get to touch the money. Right, that's a biggie, and it's important. And GoFundMe owns them. GoFundMe themselves, those campaigns are typically organized by the beneficiary themselves, who may be in a situation where they've got medical expenses that they can't cover and they may not be insured. That's an example of people saying, send me money. And it's an incredibly powerful and efficient way for people to raise money for themselves and their own challenges and reach their friends or their community for outreach. So that's a different beast than donating to a charity. I think everyone on this who's listening here should think about organizations like DonorsChoose.org, which is also an extraordinary organization which allows teachers to ask for supplies that they need in their classroom but can't afford through the school budget. They make their request of DonorsChoose. DonorsChoose purchases those products in bulk at vast discounts and sends the products that the teachers need directly to the schools themselves. So if you're on a DonorsChoose, if you're on the DonorsChoose.org site and you're seeing a crowdfunding campaign, you can be guaranteed that teacher will never get the cash themselves. They will literally be receiving exactly what their students need, like 3 microscopes or whatever the request is for. So that's another really great one that has spent an enormous amount of time and effort to make sure that donations are used as efficiently as possible and that the teacher never have the opportunity to touch the cash in a way that it could be diverted.
Great tip.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a good tip. It makes me think. I'm involved with dog rescue. What a lot of the nonprofits do is, instead of raising the money for the rescue themselves, what they do is the money goes, for example, to the PayPal for the veterinarian, and you can call and check because the legitimate rescues will post that type of information. So you could actually call up the veterinarian and say, hey, is the money for this dog going to this PayPal address, and confirm it. We've got more to talk about. I want to do our last commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about, I have some questions about the celebrities that we were talking about before, and then also what people can do, if they're ripped off. So stay with us. Back in a moment.
Consumers, do you have bad credit? Can't purchase a house or car? Paying too much in interest on your credit cards and loans? Scammed by credit repair companies? there is hope. You can get back on track and do it the right way. Call Credit Education Consultants today at 813-500-6064. That's 813-500-6064. Or go to crediteducationconsultants.com now and get the help you need. Don't delay. Call today. Mortgage reps and realtor inquiries are also welcomed.
We're back on AM/FM 24/7 radio with our special guest, Larry Lieberman. He's the CEO of C.O.O. of Chariy Navigators. I had another question for you. How do us as consumers protect our privacy? And let me tell you why. Years ago, I donated some money to a charity, which was a viable charity. But soon thereafter, I think most of your 1.8 million contacted me about donating money to them. How do we protect our privacy?
Right. So another issue that we're very concerned with at Chariy Navigator. Donor privacy is critical for an organization to maintain, especially as they want to facilitate a long-term relationship with any and all of their donors. So it goes back to reminding everyone that the overwhelming majority of nonprofits are well-run, executing on their mission, and enormously respectful of your privacy. That being said, when you give to an organization, on their website there is virtually always a checkbox that gives you the opportunity to not be contacted again by the organization or anybody else. You can also always give your money anonymously on a website, and even when donors come to Chariy Navigator and use our giving basket to make the donation right on our site, a good percentage are doing so to make sure their donations remain anonymous, because we'll never, unless you say it's okay, we will never forward your name onto the organization. So we go out of our way to also help consumers that way. The flip side of it is, it goes back to my comments earlier. You want to stay in touch with an organization, so you want to make sure they're able to contact you. You want to support them with recurring donations, but you don't want to give them permission to sell your name.
Got it. And I think what's important, too, with the charities is the volunteering, which I see you mentioned on your site. It's always, I volunteered for a long time, and my philosophy is if everybody volunteered even an hour a week, the whole world would be a totally different place. And I know a lot of the charities are looking for people to volunteer, so if you don't have money to give, you can always give your time. But I wanted to backtrack just quickly. We were talking about, celebrity endorsers. If a celebrity is endorsing a charity and getting paid, I'm assuming that has to be disclosed, correct?
Ordinarily, it would be disclosed by a charity, yes.
Okay. I asked that because, again, I've worked with a celebrity for a nonprofit that I was with, and everything she did out of her own pocket to help the organization. But nowadays, I look, and you see celebrities on these drug commercials, and it'll say, this person is a paid, Alex Trebek is a paid endorser for whatever it is, and they let you know. So, I think people want to know, is their money actually going to good use? And then on your site, do you show the percentages of the money that's actually going to the benefit of the charity versus what the executives are taking in?
We do, actually. The expenses on Chariy Navigator's website for all the organizations we rate are broken down into the amount of money that goes to the programs themselves, whatever the organization has as a mission to work on, as well as expenses that go towards fundraising and expenses that go towards overhead. It's important to note that we go out of our way not to use metrics like CEO salary as in and of itself an indicator that an organization is doing well or not well. It's so important for this sector to attract the very, very best talent to do the most effective works. Some of the problems that nonprofits are addressing are extraordinarily difficult and actually too hard for the private sector to solve on their own. So things like CEO compensation in and of themselves are not an indicator to give or not give to an organization. In many, many cases, these executives are giving up careers that are far more lucrative in the private sector to apply their expertise to solving a world problem.
Okay, and I've got one more question, and then Storm, you can have them next. But if somebody feels that they've been ripped off by a charity, whether reputable or not reputable, can they report it to you?
We actually encourage them to report it to their police, who then pass the matter on to the state attorney general. We are not an enforcement body of any kind, but certainly what's great in this day and age is that media outlets and your local police department are fully equipped to investigate your allegations and, if necessary, take them further.
Got it. Storm, more questions? Storm?
I was asleep at the switch there. Obviously, these reputable charities have to register with the IRS, and I would assume in a lot of instances that they would also have to be registered with states. So is that another way to check? Well, obviously, the way to really check is to come to your website. Clearly, first things first, before anybody was going to, or before I would donate money, I'd go to your website first. But for others who may lose your website, lose your name, or whatever the case may be, would it be an indicator of a possible scam if they're not registered with the as a 501(c) and to be able to check to see if they're registered with the state? That would be a good way to at least raise some red flags for most consumers. Would that be a correct statement?
You're absolutely correct. I can even say it with more certainty. If an organization is not registered with the IRS as a 501(c) organization, they're not a nonprofit. Your donations to them are not tax deductible. Okay? So if you have any doubt, one simple thing that perhaps the listeners can remember, ask for the tax ID of the organization you're giving to. It's simple to go to Google and enter the tax ID and determine right then very quickly whether an organization is a registered nonprofit, and yes, they need to register with the IRS, and they are regulated by state government.
And so when they send you mail, are they required to put their 501(c)(3) nonprofit on that mailer, for example?
They're not required to put it on every solicitation, but they should always have a link or a place for additional information for you to do some research on your own. But again, if someone calls you, very simple, just to ask for the tax ID number.
Got it. And then, one of the other things you cover on your site, you have a whole list of hot topics. Every time there's a hurricane and there's a storm, you've got the legitimate ones and the not legitimate ones. And I see on social media there's so many. So I'm hoping that the listeners actually, do listen and go to Chariy Navigator and type in the name, because some of them are just made up, like you said, for people who just want to collect money off of the victims. And I think a lot of times people may get away with it, the people who are doing it, because no one realizes that they're not a real charity, correct? There's only a few, especially relative to the number of organizations that are doing the right thing and are doing incredible work. Our hot topics are by far the most trafficked portion of our site. People want to know where they can give during times of the current tsunami in Indonesia, hurricanes in Houston or elsewhere, the flooding that's been going on in the Carolinas. So you want to make sure that the organizations you're giving to are focused on the areas that you're interested in making sure the relief is going to. So yes, the hot topic area is really an essential part of most people's giving, because giving in America, we are generous people. And when we see in the news that there are people suffering,
whether they be in Indonesia or Puerto Rico or Texas or South Carolina, people take action. Americans want to help. They want to give. And it's very important that you do your research to know that the organization you're giving to is, in fact, supporting the relief efforts in that area.
Actually, just as a repeat of what I said earlier about certain groups that were, using or soliciting money with names that sounded familiar, I do know that one of them, it was in Indiana, and there's the Wounded Warrior Project, which is a multi-million-dollar nonprofit organization that is for real. But these scammers up there, they had what was called the Wounded Warrior Fund, and it was found out that they had hit over 1,000 people. Hit over 1,000 people for donations. So when you look at, again, the Wounded Warrior Project, very famous. You see them on television quite often. And then here's these scammers come along with the Wounded Warrior Fund. Sounds almost like the same thing. And here they are collecting money. That's what's so scary. And that's why it's necessary and imperative for anyone that is going to, and I didn't know you existed, and I'm glad we had you on, because it's clear to me now that it's necessary and imperative that before anyone donates any money to anyone, they should go to your group, to your website, to check out, what's there and what they can find out, and maybe save themselves some heartache by going to Chariy Navigator. Would you be so kind to give us all your coordinates, everything clear, so our listeners can write it down and go to your website and get the information that you need? I mean, it's been great for me today. I got a hell of a lesson.
Me too.
Great. I mean, it is charitynavigator.org. You can enter it in your toolbar. You can enter it in Google. The website is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Well over 10 million people use us every day. So it use us every year, rather, and it is our home base. And it is the place right now where, if your listeners, Stormy, want to check in on what you just said, you can enter Wounded Warrior Project in the search bar at Chariy Navigator and read our full evaluation analysis of the organization and see that they are a highly rated charity. Also, just as simply, you can type in Wounded Warrior Fund and see that there's an advisory against that organization. It's that simple. You've been so informative. I think we both learned a lot on this, and that's the purpose of the show. I mean, Storm and I both like learning it, but we like sharing it with the listeners because we both get so many calls from people that have been scammed in some way or another. And, I think we definitely want to thank you for being on the show and taking time out of your busy day to do the show today. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me, Lori.
Thank you. all right. And for our listeners?
Just as much as our veterans are serving our country, Larry, you and your organization certainly are protecting our country as well by, having an organization that is educating the public, because everyone that we've had on our show, they've all said that the best way to stop scams, don't do it after the fact, do it before the fact by educating the public, and that is obviously what you folks are doing, and I really appreciate you coming on and what you're doing as your service to our country.
It's very nice of you to say thank you so much. It's really a joy to be able to work here at Chariy Navigator.
Great. Well, I want to thank both of you. It was a great show. And for our listeners, thanks for joining us today on Fraudsters Radio. You can join us again next Monday from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time live. Remember, we do want to hear your stories, and you can contact us through the Fraudsters Radio Facebook page. Thank you very much, Larry, Storm. Great speaking with you both. Good information.
Enjoy your week.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.